Hello guys, welcome to my Excoundrel patch 2.3 tier list with the Riven and Irelia release included. This is a big one. I put a lot of effort into this, so I'd really appreciate if you enjoy it or you want to talk about it, leave a comment, like or dislike if you want to, and subscribe to the channel because for this tier list I consulted with so many players. I had a lot of help from two players from Tribe Gaming, which is I'm the Doom, the jungler, and Snitch, the mid laner, who, if you know Snitch, he streams on Twitch and has a YouTube channel, which I'll link in the description below. I did a lot of talking back and forth with them. They did a lot of kind of like looking at my tier list and seeing what they disagreed with and agreed with, and we got to a point where these guys were like some of the best challenger players in Europe. We kind of said, okay, this feels pretty good for your average player, including the release of Riven and Irelia. So we're going to talk a little bit about that now in greater detail. Okay, so let's start off with the Baron lane. Oh, thanks to G2A for sponsoring the channel. Reference link in the description below. And if you comment on this video and you're subscribed to the channel, you can win a giveaway. 10 skins in July, drawn on July 1st through the month of June. So there you go, boom. Okay, so let's talk about the Baron lane tier list. The Garen nerfs meant diddly poo. The Gragas nerfs meant very little. They are still super strong. They actually moved up from my last tier list because they got progressively stronger from the patch. And really, Garen and Gragas still remaining as two of the strongest Baron lane picks in the game. Fiora still up there, by the way. She's still one of the best carry Baron laners that you can go. However, in S tier, Malphite, Camille, Darius, all still strong. Darius nerfs. They did hurt Darius a lot, don't get me wrong. I was tempted to put him down to A tier, but to be honest with you, I've still seen a lot of Dariuses do really well, and Phase Rush is a rune that works really well on Darius, especially for threatening AD carries in team fights, so probably still remains as a good solo Q pick. But Renekton has made his way to S tier. Now, this is one thing that not everybody agreed on my placement with, but actually, the Renekton buffs seem to have really helped him. And I've seen a lot of people go Blade of the Ruined King first Renekton and actually have really great success. I've actually been watching some scrims of pro teams where they've been playing Renekton and he's actually popped off. So Blade of the Ruined King into Black Cleaver, and he seems like a relatively strong pick in the Baron lane right now. Riven and Irelia, they feel like okay picks. The reason Riven and Irelia aren't super high tier, despite I think them being relatively strong champions, is they actually have a lot of bad matchups. Like, Irelia and Riven both lose to Garen, they both lose to Renekton, they lose to Gragas, they lose realistically to Darius, although Riven can beat Darius. So there are lots of like bad matchups for these two in the Baron lane. However, I do believe that as people get more and more used to them, we might see these rise, but they are definitely what we call scary one-trick champions, which is why they are highlighted in red. What we mean when we say a scary one-trick champion is we are talking about a champion that is particularly good when someone has a certain mastery level on that champion, when they've played it enough so they kind of know the ins and outs at like a really high level. Akali actually got really hurt in the Baron lane. She used to be very high tier, but the armor nerf, and because the Baron lane is predominantly dominated by armor-based champion, AD-based champions, she actually loses a lot of matchups early on. Though I do believe Akali is actually better in the late game now. Pantheon is a solid Baron laner. Wukong and Kennen are in A tier, and they are highlighted as potentially sleeper OP. I think Wukong's still going to be played more jungle than he is Baron lane, but I've been hearing rumblings from pro players that tank Wukong is actually pretty legit. Whether that's good enough in solo queue, I don't know. And Kennen does seem to be making his way back into the meta slightly. That small cooldown buff to his second ability early on allows him to abuse matchups a little more. Olaf, and I've moved people down, like Jarvan, Singed, and Olaf, I've moved them down because realistically you're not likely, if you're really interested in playing meta champions, you're not likely to pick them over the champions that are currently sitting in like S, A, and S plus tier. Vayne could have a place in the meta because she's pretty good against tanks, but it takes a little too long and she's too susceptible to ganks, and so I still don't think Vayne is like an insane pick. But Vayne is like a good counter pick into things like, I don't know, like Gragas and Garen, because she actually does really well into them, but she's not very good in a game. So like she's good into the lane, into like Garen and Gragas, but not very good in an actual game because she's too easy to gank and she's a little weak in that sense. But that's the Baron lane. Shall we move on to the jungle? Okay, let's take a look at the jungle now, and we're going to start off looking right at the top, which is going to be dominated by Lee Sin. But oh my god, is that Fizz? Yes, it is. I've talked to a lot of junglers. Not everybody agrees with this, but I'm sticking to this one because Doom as well. I'm the Doom, the jungler for Tribe, is a big proponent of Jungle Fizz. I think Jungle Fizz is insane. I think Jungle Fizz is actually legit broken right now. He's got a good clear speed that is just as good as Lee Sin's, and his level 5, because you can rush level 5 pretty quickly in the jungle, is so good. Like, it's actually insane. His ganks at level 5 are nutty, and you can really snowball Fizz in the jungle. And so I'm thinking Fizz in the jungle has suddenly become, like, just because they made it easier for him to clear camps, he has suddenly become a very, very strong pick. And so I think you're going to see more and more Fizz jungle throughout this meta. Darkbreaker made a video on it, if you saw, but it's also something that has been sort of being seen more of in sort of high elo solo queue. Camille, great jungler. Evelyn, great jungler. Wukong, very, very good jungler. But is that Kha'Zix? Yes. Apparently the isolation buff actually has made him much more easily able to snowball and do much more in team fights. So people have to be a lot more careful about where they're standing in team fights, and that gives Kha'Zix that extra ability to sort of deal deal with the individual targets. And so Kha'Zix has been kind of popping out in high elo solo queue a lot more recently, and he's actually feeling in a pretty good spot right now. I've moved the likes of Jarvan and Vi down, as well as Olaf, because they're good. They're good picks. Like I put them in very good previously, but when I really thought about it, I had a very overpopulated S tier in the jungle, and like Jarvan and Vi are good picks. They're not insane or OP. They're not going to suddenly carry a game by themselves. With, you know, as you can see, that the meta in the jungle right now is very dominated by squishier, burst-heavy champions. But they're good picks, and if your team needs a tank, they're a good, solid choice. Rengar has dropped down a little bit. The 20 AD nerf did hurt him, but also I think people have started to figure out how to play against Rengar. People are now more aware of his level 5. They're more aware of how to deal with him in team fights. You group up and you wait, you apply the CC to him when he pops out. So I think Rengar is now a solid jungler, but he's not insanely OP. Olaf has dropped off. The reason Olaf's dropped off is that because the meta isn't really dominated by high CC anymore. When I say high CC, I mean crowd control, so things like stuns, knockups, slows, etc. And Olaf really thrived in a meta where that was very popular. But right now, the meta is more dominated, especially in the jungle, by burst damage. Very quick burst damage orientated team fights, and Olaf is not as good in those types of metas. Pantheon feels pretty solid, nothing special, but pretty solid. Shyvana, She's been nerfed too many times, and I don't think she's insane, but she's pretty good. If they pick Ramos or, you know, a Mumu, I'm going to pick Shyvana because she gets to farm for free. Xin Zhao does not feel great, even though they made him like this AP build path work for him. I don't think Xin Zhao feels great. Riven jungle is not all that good, honestly. Much better suited to mid lane or the Baron lane. And Graves did not get as much of a benefit out of the Graves did not get as much of a benefit out of the phase rush as I thought he would. So that's the jungle tier list. Really kind of dominated in high elo right now by Lee Sin and Fizz, which is crazy. All right, let's have a look at the Orianna now. The Orianna, the mid lane. Used to be that Orianna dominated this completely, but actually now things have changed just a little bit. And as you can see, Diana really I'd say that Diana is really the only absolute S+ tier. It's quite close. I don't think there are many super broken mid laners right now, but Diana feels like the sort of the best mid laner in the meta. Akali definitely feels better mid right now than she does in the Baron lane because her matchups are slightly easier, and that armor nerf doesn't affect her as much, especially when you're going into other AP champions. Orianna still solid. Katarina still very good, and especially we've seen some Katarinas with phase rush. It's kind of memes to see how quickly she can go in her ultimate. Ziggs, yeah, solid. Great mid laner. Still played a lot in competitive for his tower taking potential, even though he got nerfed. It hasn't hit it too much. Irelia is S. Why is Irelia S tier in the mid lane? I think the thing about Irelia is that she's very hard to play. So if people are picking Irelia now, they're probably going to be running it down because she's very hard to play. But once people start to get used to her and start to pick up her and master her a bit more, I do believe she's going to be one of the strongest mid laners in the game. She's a good mid laner that deals with ranged mid laners very easily. She's AD as well, which puts a lot of pressure and makes itemization awkward for a lot of matchups in the mid lane. So it's nice to have, you know, like a strong AD mid laner that isn't just Zed, because previously really you just kind of saw Zed. But you know, I think Irelia is going to be very good once people get a little bit more proficient with her. Ahri, solid. Galio, solid. Corki has dropped down from S tier, and so has Galio actually. Galio feels like more of a good counter pick into things like, I would pick Galio into Diana. I'd pick Galio into Katarina, for instance, but I wouldn't pick Galio into like so many other matchups. I pick Galio mid because I feel safe on him, but he's not like he's not like super dominant anymore. Corki has dropped off because they nerfed Champion, which was a rune that Corki went because he was so safe. They've nerfed Triforce, which is one of Corki's true items, sort of core items. And actually now that if you go Manamune Corki, you're a little bit slower to ramp up, and that just kind of makes him less powerful than he was before. He doesn't spike on Triforce as hard as he did, and that doesn't allow him to take over at that first dragon fight really quickly. Twisted Fate is okay. Zed's solid. Riven feels like a good mid laner, but not exactly overpowered right now. And again, with Riven, it's probably similar to Irelia, that once people start to do better with her and master her, you're going to see her do better. But again, Riven, if I was going to pick a Riven into a matchup where Riven would do well, I would probably just pick Irelia if I was good enough at both of them. You know, that's the way I think about that particular matchup. So, you know, I think with Riven versus Irelia, I think Irelia is just better, but Riven is still a good pick and can still do very well, especially in the hands of the right person. Yasuo feels pretty bad. I know a lot of people think that he's kind of sleeper, but I just think he feels pretty bad right now. Aurelion Sol doesn't feel great. Kennen still not particularly strong in the mid lane. Neither is Fizz. Renekton feels like a counter pick, so I'd pick Renekton if they picked Riven or Irelia, but otherwise I wouldn't. Same with Pantheon, realistically. Annie is kind of and then there is Lux, who's better suited in support. Rightio, should we go and have a look at the AD carries now? So really, the meta feels very dominated by Kai'Sa and Ezreal still. They feel like the two best AD carries in the meta right now. For my S tier AD carries, I've put Xayah, I've put Varus, which a lot of you might think is interesting, but Varus has been getting more and more popular. And if you build AP Varus, you're trolling. Don't listen to these YouTube videos that suddenly say that AP Varus is OP. AP Varus is not OP. What is good, though, however, is the Lethality Varus. Manimune into Lethality build, which you've seen probably pop up quite a lot. The Duskblade buff has helped him as well. So I think, you know, Varus is a very, very strong pick, especially if you go down the Lethality pathway. Jinx, good. You know, she's good. She's a good solo queue pick. She can take over games by herself. I was speaking to a couple of the tribe guys and they didn't feel like Corki was as high, but I know over in Southeast Asia, Corki still remains a very high priority AD carry pick. And so I think that's why people are not playing him as mid much now, because he's being played much more in the AD carry role. Draven, he's good. Like, Draven's good. He can take over games, but if you don't get those early kills, he feels bad. Tristana feels solid. Jhin feels okay. More of a facilitating AD carry with the right type of comp. And honestly, Vayne is kind of popping off right now. We are starting to see Vayne really like get back into the meta, and I think it's because like the rise of this kind of tankier top lane meta where we have like the Gragases and the Garens. Well, that's where Vayne starts to shine. She's got a bit of mobility, she's got a bit of self-peel, she goes invisible, makes it sometimes hard to burst her out. Vayne is gaining a bit of value. Misfortune's dropped off the face of the planet. Ziggs is more of a competitive pick, and Ashe feels absolutely giga garbage. Like, not a great pick at all, to be honest with you, in the bot lane. So that's the AD carries. Let's move on to the other half of the bot lane, which will be the supports. Okay, supports. And it's actually apt to have Blitzcrank as the intro here, because he has gained a bit of value, and the support tier list felt really weird to make, honestly. It felt very odd. Janna and Braum still dominate the meta. Font of Life has honestly just made Braum better, but Font of Life has also made Nami really good. Like, it's a really great rune for Nami. And so like Lux, Nami, and Alistar feel like solid picks. People really crap on Alistar right now, but I genuinely believe Alistar is still a strong support, and I will stand and die on that hill if I have to. Other than that, there are just a load of like good supports, A-tier supports that are also like very sort of specific. Galio is, you know, a solid answer into some engaged supports. Rakan is very, very strong if you pick Xayah, otherwise just a good support right now. Seraphine's strong. Leona is good. Like Lulu feels like a comp dependent, like, you know, you pick Vayne or Jinx, you might pick Lulu to supplement that. But why is Blitzcrank suddenly A tier? Well, the meta is kind of Enchanter dominated, or like a very Enchanter favored. So obviously you have the likes of Alistar and Braum still there, but there are lots of Enchanters in the meta, and Blitzcrank got a little buff, and actually with the jungle meta being very squishy. So like if you go back and look at the jungle picks, a lot of the high tier jungle picks right now are kind of very, very squishy. So that's where Blitzcrank gets more value, because you're pulling squishy targets, right? Pantheon feels like he does the same kind of thing as Leona, so he's there. Sona and Soraka don't feel absolutely insane, and I don't really rate Galio or Annie, but they're also there. But yeah, that's why Blitzcrank's getting a bit of value right now, because it's a very Enchanter-dominated meta, and also there's lots of squishy jungle picks, and that's kind of where Blitzcrank is shining. So this is the support meta. Hasn't changed a huge amount, though, so if you're playing the same supports from last patch, you're probably doing fine. All right, guys, I've had an absolutely brilliant time. I put a lot of effort into this, as I said. I really, really enjoyed doing this kind of video, and I got a lot of help and support from some really, really great pro players. So give them a look in the description, mainly Snitch. Doom doesn't really have any socials or anything like that to plug. So yeah, thank you so much, guys, and I'll see you soon.